Hey everybody, it's Nate. So in a couple weeks, we've got parent-teacher conferences coming up. You can't stop it. It's coming, whether you like them, whether you don't like them. That really is irrelevant. But I thought, hey, I'm going to put together a guide for making our parent-teacher conferences super legit. So let's take a look at this, and hopefully it'll give you some ideas that will help you. All this is going to be available if you want a copy of the slides for questions or whatever. That's cool. Just let me know. So let's take a look here and see what we can do to soup up our parent teacher conferences, right? Let's take a look at a few ideas. First of all, it does take three people to have a great parent teacher conference, or at least three groups of people, right? The teacher, the student, and the families. So come into it looking at it like as a three-person team. And always the thought has to be on the future. There's nothing we can do to go back in time, right? It's not like a gripe session for like, hey, that happened, I'm mad, or this happened and I want it to change. You can't do it. Okay. But finally, last thing I wanted to mention was teachers, you got to realize that maybe parents or kids don't have these tools or these ideas or others that you might have that I'm about ready to share. So you might want to make a little pre-conference prep kit, give it to your kids, give it to families, and see if that helps make this a positive experience for you. Okay. So I have three ideas and I want to share quickly. The first one is fine tune your communication channels. So parent teacher conferences are really short considering all the time that is spent in the classroom. And so you really want to make sure that you use the time wisely and not just to talk about things that have already happened in the past, like I mentioned, but make plans for the future and get ready for success, right? So, what could teachers do? First of all, you ought to invite families. Some families might be a little reluctant or they're not sure if they really should come. Send out an invitation. I mean, come on, it's an email or it's a flyer. It's pretty legit and it might make a difference. Send out an invitation to everybody and invite them. Let them know they're welcome. Also, when we're talking about communication, are you doing your best to share your story? Have you been sharing what's happening in your classroom on social media through the district channels? And if you have, awesome. If you haven't, hey, you can start, right? There's a district Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook accounts, and so there's no stopping you from sharing the good things that you do. That's important. Promote yourself, right? And finally, um, be ready with a printout or something so when the families come in, you can make sure that the information you have to contact them is correct. Sometimes it's not always correct. So when the kids come, maybe this is something you prep with them ahead of time. Have the kids be ready to share two positive experiences, whether they're there, whether they're attending live or whether they have written this down. Share two positive learning experiences they had in your class and one suggestion for improvement. It's fair to let them contribute. And finally, when the parents come or the families, make sure that they know how to log into Infinite Campus and stress to them that's for attendance, fees, things like that. And ask this question, say, hey, do I know how to get into Google Classroom so I can see all the activities day by day that are happening in my kid's class? That's a fair question, right? So those are some good ones. And also, if the teachers are putting stuff on social media for you to see what's going on, dude, follow it, right? I mean, follow the accounts. Next thing we can, I think this is for me probably my, if I'm preaching, this is the biggest one, right? We need to focus on learning, not just grades. Grades are super subjective. Um, an A or a B or a C in one class might be a totally different thing in another class. Or maybe another school or another district, it means something different. Another state, who knows, right? And so if we're just focusing on that, then the question is always, what do I have to do to get an A? What do I have to do to get a B? What do I have to do to get a C? Can I have extra credit? Blah, blah, blah. Those things drive me nuts, right? And that has nothing to do with learning. I've seen a lot of kids with good grades that would confess, they'd say, no, I'm not really learning anything. I'm just getting a good grade. On the other hand, there are a lot of kids that are like, I don't care about a grade. So, dude, the focus has to be on learning, has to be. So, teachers, you can help promote the focus to be on learning by having learning targets ready to share with families. Not just grades. We're not just like, he has a 61.3%. That doesn't mean anything. That's just a number, right? But have learning targets like, hey, I wanted my kid to know how to, or I wanted your student to know how to write an essay or whatever it is, right? You can support your sharing information by having scores ready. You can say, well, look, I know you're concerned. It looks like your kid may not be doing super awesome, but let's take a look at where standardized test scores say they're achieving. Have those ready to share and have a real conversation. It's not like hacking on anybody, it's just sharing real stuff, right? And finally, can you share some various learning opportunities that were offered to your kid? Can you say, we had these projects, or we had this hands on thing we did, or, I make note takers for the kids. Can you share the opportunities that were given to the student to learn? That's important. Families might not know everything that's there. So now to kids, right? Can you describe what you're supposed to be learning in class? If you can't, then that probably should change. I mean, you're in there, it's your class, you should be knowing what you're supposed to be learning. And then can you show what you have done to learn, right? Do you have notes? Every class, you should be taking notes. You should have study materials of some kind, not just like a handout that somebody photocopied for you, but something you have created to help yourself learn. So, students, you ought to come prepared to do that. That's fair. And finally, parents, think about ways, and if you have questions on how to do this, conferences are a great way to have a conversation with the teacher to ask for help. When you ask your kid about school, are you saying, what's your grade? That's like saying, what's that number? That doesn't mean anything, right? If that's the focus, then there's always going to be the questions like, oh, can you do extra credit? Extra credit has nothing to do with learning, right? Um, so when you talk to your student, think about mentioning learning. Like, what are you learning? What are you learning how to do, or what are you understanding? Don't mention that grade thing. The grade, I know parents are needing to have their kids get good grades. I get that, right? But I'm telling you, if you focus on learning, the grade's going to take care of itself. I promise. Okay? So, and finally, you can ask, what do you need? Ask the parent or ask the teacher. Say, hey, look, I need some help. Can you make sure that I know where to find the learning goals, so when I'm talking to my kid, I know what's going on, stuff like that. This is a big one. Okay, I'm done preaching. Last one. So kids are more than just, a report card or something like that. So it's a great time in parent teacher conferences to discuss how the student actions and character might be affecting their learning, right? And how they're getting along with other people. Teachers, let's be positive, right? So you could start off with some good vibes. Describe, what good do you see in the student as a person? How does a student work? And then you can go on, how does a student's work ethic affect their learning? Maybe you have these study guides and are just not getting filled out or something like that. I don't know. Maybe, um, some work isn't getting turned in. And I'll say this for families, right? If you want a teacher to be able to evaluate how much your student's learning, they got to turn something in to be able to evaluate. Now, teachers, let's be fair, we're not looking for busy work, right? Like just photocopying fat packets of stuff, that may not be measuring learning. So you can have a real conversation here, but if students are turning in original work, that gives us a chance to see what they know. If they're not, then come on, work ethic, people. Um, and finally, you might mention some habits, maybe, social habits or something like that, which might help or hurt their learning. So, kids, you got to come into this with an open mind too. You got to say, okay, I heard what the teacher said. You get a chance to say what you think about it. You get to make a plan, maybe make one goal and say what you'll do, commit to your parents, commit to your teacher. What's one thing you're going to do to improve your learning based on what's going on in this conversation? And then finally, you know, maybe you could give some suggestions. You're like, I'd really like to see some more of this type of activity, or I really like working in groups, or whatever. You can give a suggestion, right? Um, what would you like to see in class? And then parents, you get the last word. I mean, that's fair, right? You're coming in, and anything you want the teacher to know, any questions, things like that. And that's super important. This communication, I mean, this should be like, okay, this is step one. We're going to communicate like crazy from now on. So, the wrap up, right? You hug. Just kidding. You don't have to hug each other. You don't have to be like best friends. But I'll tell you what, the relationship between families and teachers should be a positive one. If you want to help kids, then please remember the purpose of parent teacher conferences is not to come in and try to decide who's right or who's wrong or this or that. The purpose is we're coming in to see what we can do to help a kid. And if you come in with that, you're going to finish right and you're going to walk away with some plans or at least more understanding, right? And that's super important. So thank you for your time. I hope you'll consider this. Like I said, if you are interested in a copy of this slideshow so that you can copy things or whatever, I'm happy to share it with you. It's not anything secret, and I really just want to see if it can help out some families, some kids, some teachers have a positive parent teacher conference experience. All right. Thank you very much for your time. Have a good day.